Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Welcome to Web3 Warriors, episode 71, featuring Christian Burke, the lead data scientist and part of the Refik Anadol studio, and an AI expert. I'm really looking forward to picking your brain today. Christian, welcome. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, appreciate the time.
Thank you for joining. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to a real data scientist about the impacts of AI and where things are kind of moving towards. So with that, thank you again for joining us. This is the Web3 Warriors. I'm your host, David Karoma, go by Chrome in the metaverse. And as I've said, today we're going to be looking at the topic of AI and really its intersection with art and with Web3 and the blockchain and the metaverse, and really where we see this all going. And it seems to be moving at a pretty quick pace, but maybe someone from Christian's perspective might be able to give us more of the long view, and he's been in the game for a bit longer, so he's not caught up maybe in all of the craze of the last year or two when it comes to AI and how things have been evolving. So on the topic of AI and really what I've been able to see so far before we speak to the expert is really the way that its intersection with art has created a whole new avenue for creators and people who are artistic maybe, but not in the traditional sense, to kind of put their words and make their words turn into art with what they're calling now prompt engineers, people who are able to really enter some interesting prompts into different types of AI machines or applications, whether it's Mid-Journey, Stable Diffusion's another one. There were a lot that have come out in the last year or two, and they seem to be evolving pretty quickly. But now it's given the ability for really anyone who has an artistic want or desire, but maybe didn't have the traditional ability to create art, to be able to now plug words into an app and have art kind of come out, and it's been really interesting to see that impact on the NFT space, right? And of course, we've heard from a lot of artists who have concerns about, can any of this art now pass for art in the general sense? And is that going to be taking away work from, traditional artists? As a collector of art on the blockchain, I definitely I'm partial to the traditional art, but I have collected some, artificial intelligence infused artworks. Shout out to NFTP, shout out to Dr. Lemney, who are actually our last two guests, both of whom have used AI in different ways to create really amazing artistic projects. So we've definitely seen it used in very inspiring ways. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that impact evolves from here. But I do think there's always going to be a space for traditional art. And, we always like to say on the show, Web3 is about abundance over scarcity, And so instead of thinking, these people are taking our jobs or AIs are going to take our jobs, let's think about how AI complements creators, and how AI maybe takes it to a new level and makes collaboration that much easier and really motivates us to kind of just find new ways and use it as a tool, right? So that's one piece that we've definitely seen, and I think it's an ever-evolving kind of space in the art corner of NFTs and Web3. So it'll be interesting to hear what Christian thinks about that. But also on the metaverse side, we've seen NVIDIA and Unreal Engine coming up with some really cool kind of use cases for AI. And really, one that I saw was where they flew a drone into the sky over a city, and the drone took just a shot of the entire city from way up in the sky, but using AI and putting it into their kind of rendering software on the Unreal Engine, which is using NVIDIA's chip, NVIDIA being a graphic processing unit developer maker. So they were able to actually use that drone footage, and then the AI kind of fills out the rest of the details, and they actually are able to create an entire immersive digital world that's mimicking what the AI or what the drone caught on video. And you're actually able to walk around in it in 3D. So now you're able to basically recreate any city, any cityscape, just by scanning it and bringing it into this software with the help of AI. So we can only imagine where that's going to bring the metaverse, and how maybe it's going to make it much easier for the average creator, builder to actually build out their own 3D space that is amazing and immersive and really high quality, which is very difficult to do right now. But I think these AI tools are going to be making that a little bit easier. So those are just two kind of really high level main points that I've seen in the Web3 space, looking at the metaverse, looking at artists, and how AI is definitely impacting the space. So with that, I definitely want to turn it over to Christian and get a little bit more in depth about the future of artificial intelligence. I will also say, anybody who's joined us in the live stream, please feel free to ask any questions. We always encourage audience participation. This is a pretty interesting subject, and we have a really great educated expert on the subject here. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask them, and we definitely encourage that all the time. So with that, Christian, thank you so much for joining. Maybe before we dive into the AI conversation, as this is the Web3 Warriors, I would love to hear a little bit about, what brought you to Web3 and blockchain and your experiences with that as well. But thank you for joining.
Yeah, sure. And again, thanks for having me. I guess a bit about myself, right? I'm the lead data scientist at Refik Anadol Studio. I started this journey in 2018 when I was a sophomore in college, actually. And the very first project I came in and worked on, Refik had a creative vision for it and said, hey, can you collect data for this project? And I was like, all right, let's do it. And in 2018, for that project, I was able to collect then what was the largest data set ever used for like a piece of artwork, which was great. Wow. And then, just kept working through college pretty much, and have been here now about 6 years. So it's been an amazing journey for the last 6 years in the AI space. Leading a team of like pretty multidisciplinary experts in machine learning and AI and data science. And then also in the last few years, I've really served as like the lead web and Web3 developer and consultant and project manager. Also I guess community manager as well. The community is super important in the Web3 space.
For sure.
So yeah, it's just a little bit of my background. We really got into NFTs as a studio in about 2020. And it was really interesting because one of our, collectors in the traditional gallery space came to us and said, hey, I love your artwork and I love owning your artwork, but I want to feel like I really own it. And he introduced us to the NFTs in a pretty early state. And we were like, wow, this is a really cool piece of technology. And obviously working in, cutting edge tech, you're always interested in new stuff and what people are building. So yeah, we got really interested in it primarily from like an ownership standpoint. Right? Like collectors just wanted to feel like they truly owned the work. And, obviously when you're talking about distribution of digital assets, there's a lot of, nuanced discussion around ownership and, what do you do with the files? How do you prove you own something? So that's really where we got into the Web3 journey. That was my introduction.
So you're on the bleeding edge of technology, but weren't necessarily looking at blockchain, Web3, from that perspective until a collector of the art, your AI art, or AI infused art. I don't know if AI art is how you pronounce that or how you describe that. But they wanted to own it in the real sense. And so they said, hey, why don't you put it on the blockchain and you'll be able to actually sell this. And how have you experienced that from a studio perspective? Like, obviously there's another avenue for revenue, right? And how has it kind of helped the overall, movement and evolution of Refik Anadol Studio, which is quite an impressive kind of operation you've got there?
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, it definitely helped move things forward in my mind. Of course, right? Like you said, it is a very different market. There is some overlap between like your traditional gallery and art collectors and the Web3 collectors, but mostly it was in production to like a pretty new scene of people there. On a whole, I mean, I would just say really good experience overall, and been an excellent way to share with more people. And the really amazing thing about the Web3 space to me is that it's so personally connected. A lot of times when you go and you work with galleries, there's a lot of like in between discussions between the gallerists and the curators and everyone and us, and ultimately who ends up getting the final artwork. It's been an excellent way for us to connect very directly with our actual audience, interact with people, meet them online, and then do events and installations and meet them in real life. So it's been a pretty exceptional journey.
Awesome. So it sounds like it's more from a community building standpoint. Even though I imagine you've brought in some significant revenue, you're not necessarily looking at NFTs as like a kind of main source of revenue or like really about bread and butter. It's really just about kind of building network, building collectors, as opposed to necessarily making money.
Yeah, I mean, for us, art is the real mission of what we do. And I would say from day one as a studio, the mission has never really been about financial success or anything like that, right? What we're predominantly focused on is the cultural and societal and emotional impact that art can have on people. And, also using cool technology and, really experimenting and doing research in the field is more our focus.
Awesome. Very cool. That's great to hear. Often you hear from big studios and, you know, they're just kind of looking at the bottom line a lot of the times. But all right, let's get into artificial intelligence then, and really, you know, what it means to you. I hear a lot of differing perspectives. I've heard people say we don't not even have artificial intelligence at all yet. All we have is machine learning, or all we have is data aggregation, you know? So how do you define artificial intelligence? And I think you have a presentation to share with us as well, possibly, so I'll let you segue into that. But I'd love to hear, you know, how you define artificial intelligence, and how you kind of view the evolution going.
Yeah, I mean, defining artificial intelligence isn't necessarily like an easy thing. For the most part, the way I see it is when you can train models that have good predictive outputs. You know, this is really what artificial intelligence is to me from a very high level. You know, of course, that's like a pretty technical view of it, right? I guess if you wanted to get a little bit more
outputs, it's not too wonky, you know. I think people understand.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a hard question to answer, because I feel like when you think about and talk about artificial intelligence, there are really a lot of different areas and niche fields that you can go into. You know, just from like a top level perspective, I really think about like text processing and image processing and audio processing, and different, you know, predictive kind of AI models that you use to do things like play games or stuff like that. You know, there's a really broad range of AI subjects from a, you know, high level, and then you start unlocking like really niche applications of each one as you continue to explore them individually.
Cool. And then at its base, would you agree that it does kind of always come down to machine learning ultimately? And it's just like, you know, when it's AI is when it's like kind of functioning on its own, and do we want to get to like full AI? I don't know. You know,
yeah,
it's an interesting debate that I keep hearing from kind of wonkier people than myself, talking about the differences between machine learning and artificial intelligence. Not quite the same thing, but
yeah, they're not quite the same. They're not quite the same thing. Technically, I believe machine learning is actually a subset of artificial intelligence.
Okay.
So yeah, like you said, right? You kind of start with the machine learning, and it grows and evolves into artificial intelligence. But truthfully, you know, at least in my experience, the most important thing is always the data. When you have good data for any model that you train or anything you look at, the outputs are always better.
No doubt. I was just looking at these landscapes that one of your NFT collections there, Synthetic Dreams. It's fascinating that was done by AI. It's really something else. It's like a visceral emotion you get looking at it. So I know you want to share a bit of a presentation with us. I'd love that opportunity. So if you want to try to bring that up, and I can share the full screen here.
Yeah, cool. I just prepared a couple slides. There's nothing crazy designed or anything. And unfortunately, I couldn't include any videos. You know, usually when you're streaming a video like this, you know, it ends up looking really glitchy over video. But I encourage you to go, you know, check out our websites for Refik.
Yeah, we'll bring it up on the screen after. We'll show a bit more of the website for sure.
But this was one of our early NFT collections. This one is Machine Hallucinations, Mars Landscapes. These are just two of the sample works from them. This actually wasn't our first NFT collection. This was our second NFT collection. This was done in May of 2021. Our first one was Machine Hallucinations Renaissance, where we trained a model to do a bunch of Renaissance sculptures, which was great.
Nice.
That was our first one, which we released in November of 2020. So that was our first ever NFT collection.
Wow.
This was the follow-up. So we used data from NASA, actually. So what you're seeing on the right side is like a machine learning representation of actual like surfaces from planets. So we have them for a couple different planets, like we have Mars, we have, you know, just galaxy and other cool concepts like that. And the piece on the left is actually Mars terrain. So this is using like the MRO rover data. You know, we're just taking the texture of the actual surface of Mars and some of the information that they gathered from, you know, what does it actually look like in terms of like a topography scan. We turned it into a cube. And so it's a really interesting flow where you watch the video and it will, you know, play this volume over time, and just it's like a representation of the topology and the actual texture. So this is a very cool. This was like our introduction to NFTs. This was all done with Nifty Gateway, who are still great friends today.
Cool.
You know, shout out to those guys for being early adopters of like credit card purchases and NFTs, and you know, well done custodial wallets. So yeah, great friends at Nifty Gateway.
That's awesome.
This has been like the most recent benchmark piece that I would say. So in November of 2021, actually, we worked with the MoMA to create an NFT collection. This was like the first ever NFT collection done by MoMA, which is, obviously a huge internationally recognized museum.
Yeah, I'll
which
just
was
interrupt
just
you real briefly. I actually had the opportunity to see this live, and so it was really cool when Sarah reached out and kind of shared this opportunity to speak to you. And I was like, I took in that art standing right in front of it, and I couldn't believe it. And it's just like the amount of people that could just stand in front of that thing for like an hour with all the different evolutions and the kind of adaptations. And then there was a whole other floor of even more AI art, and it was really something. So anyone in New York, definitely check out the Museum of Modern Art and go check out this amazing piece by the Refik Anadol studio. Sorry, I just had to say that. Quick plug.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Yeah, this is actually still open in the lobby of the MoMA right now.
Nice.
We opened this last November in 2020. It was only supposed to be up for 3 months, but I've had such great public reaction from the piece that they've kept it up until now, and it's going to be up for a while longer. So I think I think it'll be up till sometime in October. If you can get out there before then, it's a great piece. This for me also, I mean, just another comment on the MoMA installation, right? Like when I say one of the most important things to us is like the cultural and societal and emotional impact of art, this is in going and seeing one of the installations in person is where you can really start to feel it and to see it. Obviously I was there working on the setup and have been working on the project for a long time. When we actually open the installation, seeing people come and sit in front of it with their loved ones and enjoy art together is just an amazing emotional experience. We saw, young kids running in front of the screen who are really happy. And, even in some other pieces, I mean, there's one more physical installation, this one, some people have like very visceral emotional reactions where it really touches their souls to see this art and they feel something deep and meaningful. And, there's a lot of, healing in that as well. So
I can actually tell you as another anecdote that before I saw this piece, I was much more skeptical of quote unquote AI art, I will say, until then, like having seen that in the MoMA, where I respect the MoMA as an institution, right? And just reading the kind of synopsis that you have with it next to it and then experiencing the full thing, definitely, like I was like, okay, as much as I have some concerns, which we're going to talk about a little bit more around its impacts on the broader industry, I definitely see the value in it, and there's no denying that the art has that power like you just mentioned. So yeah, I was converted, I will say.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, another really cool thing about this installation too is like we always try to be really transparent in the processes that we're doing. I think one of the major concerns in AI these days is like, well, data privacy, where is the data being sourced? How's it being used? A lot of like ethical concerns when it comes to AI. And actually as part of this installation, like on the left, it's like integrated into a wall, but on the left of the actual artwork itself, we have like a peel back UI panel, which is showing all of the real-time data that's being input, how the data is being selected for the artwork, and how, some of the like I said, the real-time stuff is being used to influence the artwork, what the process is, where the data is coming from. So it's really nice to just give that perspective as well.
How much of that setup can you share with us? I'm sure it's quite, intricate, but like what is involved with setting up a massive screen like that? Shout out to Sasha and Sarah. Sasha was at the MoMA with me, so I think she saw it, but what goes into actually setting up that screen?
Oh wow! The first thing is finding the screen.
No doubt.
It's not that easy to source really large LED screens like this. Usually when you want a high quality LED screen of this size, I believe this one is. I want to say it's 10 meters by 10 meters. I think that's right. It might be a little smaller than that. But these are made of like a bunch of little LED panels. So you're essentially like stitching together the LED panels. For this particular project, we worked with an amazing company who did the screen setup called Nanolumens. They had a great AV guy come and like work on the screen. There's a lot of work that actually goes into checking each individual pixel in the LED panels as well. You need to make sure there are like no dead pixels or no like errors in the panels, no seams, no anything. So there's a lot of work on the screen side of this. And in terms of like actual setup, this is one of our more complex projects because it uses real-time data to influence the art. I would say generally when we're doing artworks, I guess when you're looking at it from this sense, you can put it in one of two categories, right? One of them is pre-rendered artwork where we do like a 8, 16, 32-minute video and then just loop it through. Right. And the other one is an artwork piece that's also done based on real-time data. So when you're using real-time data, obviously there are a lot more considerations because you need to A, collect the real-time data, and B, feed it into the artwork, and C, have a server that, processes it and handles it and does everything like that.
That's fascinating. And is it mainly for the purpose of being able to say this is real-time data kind of coming into the internet and this is just kind of a visual representation of it? Or why did you think it was important to really be capturing real-time data and sharing it kind of in live stream almost?
Well, I would say one of the really important things, at least in my mind, when I consider this, like there's a huge connection between the artwork and the physical space itself. And this is something that I feel like once you go and see one in person, you can really start to feel, right? Like, we always do, so there's a lot of work in the early planning phases of doing things like this to spec out the screen, the dimensions. We work on a bunch of renders where we're, seeing what it would look like here with this amount of light and this amount of brightness and everything like that, right? But there's a huge connection, especially when you're there in person, between what does the artwork look like? How does it connect with the physical space? And so for this piece in particular, it actually uses input data from the physical space that you're in to influence the artworok. So it's a little hard to see. But
That's so cool. So it's like environmental data that it's taking in.
Yeah, that's right. So on the top of the ceiling there, it's a little faint in this image, but you can see a little like black piece hanging down from the ceiling right there in the center. And then right next to it, very faintly, you can see like a wire that's drawn down.
Yeah.
And so what you're actually seeing there is an IR camera and a microphone. So it's using motion tracking and audio that's picked up from the lobby right there and feeding that data back into the artwork and influencing it real time.
Wow.
The other sort of live source of data is actually a weather station outside. So we're feeding in weather data and motion tracking data and audio data from
That's so cool.
the space itself.
So it's actually environmental. It's taking in everything from the environment. That's next level. Awesome.
Yeah,
well, I'm glad I got to pick your brain about that because that's something I actually experienced in person. And again, recommend everybody check out the MoMA before October when it's going to be gone. So, and yeah, you got it from roof to ceiling. And now that I know it's actually like representing the environment around it, that's fascinating. Really cool.
Yeah. Before anyone asks, we don't record and save the data from the physical space. It's just used, processed, put into the artwork, and forgotten about.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's what's up.
A lot of respect for data privacy.
Data sovereignty. That's another question I have for you on the AI topic. But all right, let's continue. I don't know if you had any more to show there.
Yeah, well, I guess one other thing that's really cool about this collection. So we did the original NFT collection, and then we did the original NFT collection in November of 21, and then we did the physical installation in November of 22. And then one of the other subjects that we're really interested in the Web3 space is like burning NFTs and activations, and what else can you do with digital artwork? And once you have like such well-proved ownership of digital artwork, you can start to do many more cool things. So actually just this past, I think it was April, it might've been June, but I believe in April, we actually did a burn for the original NFT series. So this little piece on the bottom is called the Data Universe piece. This was a 5,000 editions of this one little piece, which we originally sold for $100. And we created some burn mechanics that allowed people to exchange these NFTs from the existing collection, and they could get new NFTs and some physicals for them. So if you burn 3 of them, you get like an updated version of this NFT and like a really nice 2D print of it. If you burned 6 of them, you got a 3D render of it again, just on a pedestal, which looks great. And you also get a little 3D physical print of it. So it's really cool. It's that sphere.
That's awesome. So you got a digital whole collection that came with the burning of this NFT, and it was one of your initial kind of Genesis NFTs, basically, right?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
For only $100, they were able to get the initial one each, But if you had multiples, you could burn them for some pretty good kind of art there. That's amazing. Very cool.
Yep.
And,
anyway.
Yeah, burn mechanisms. What inspired that? Like, did you kind of have some Web3 NFT team in place to kind of say, hey, this would be a great idea, or is it just came to you?
Really, it's me and Refik from the Refik Anadol studio side. There are a couple of other people who are involved in the NFT process, of course.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we're with partners and tons of other amazing people and thought leaders, and everyone who works at the studio is incredibly creative and gives a lot of feedback on the stuff that we're doing. But the other important thing I would say is some of our community members are like really key in giving feedback. We have a Discord server with like 17,000 people in there. You know, and we have some community leaders, and, you know, we call it the Refik Anadol Studio Council, where, you know, there's a select group of people who have just been great supporters over time, always giving really, you know, positive and critical feedback on the things that we're doing and directions we're taking. So yeah, I mean, you know, pretty much anything we do in that space, we run by this group of people as well. You know, we run by the community, we get some feedback. So it's a huge collaborative effort too.
That's what's up. Very Web3. I love it.
Yeah. I'll tap through a couple of these other slides. So this was a great example also of, you know, just like one of those physical spaces being connected to the artwork. This was done at Kona Gallery in Berlin, which is this like brutalist architecture building. You know, this one particular room where the artwork was shown is like a cold, dark, really long channel. You can really get a sense of it on the left side, and it's a huge space also. It kind of gives you the feeling of like being in a chapel or a monastery or some like, you know, spiritual place almost.
Yeah, it looks quite interesting. Machine Hallucinations, Nature Dreams. What inspired that title?
Yeah. Well, Machine Hallucinations is the name we have for, you know, our overall collection of, you know, GAN studies. You know, we can talk a little bit more about what that means later, right? But yeah, that's just the overall collection title. And for this particular piece, it was done using a bunch of data from nature. So hence we have Machine Hallucinations, Nature Dreams.
Nice, nice.
This was an important landmark, at least in my mind, because this was the first time it really hit me how serious that emotional impact is. Like, you know, we saw people who would enter this space and like, you know, literally broke down crying and left the experience and were like, wow, that was like so emotional and healing. And like, thank you for that experience. So this was an important one.
That's awesome.
This was also actually an NFT. So this is a great moment and a great memory.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, this was the first really significant example for me also of like how to make a positive contribution in culture and society. So this was an important memory for humanity. This was a project that we did using data from SpaceX Inspiration 4. And what they did, they send like a group of, you know, astronauts up to space, and they record a bunch of biodata. You know, so what you see on the left actually is a 3D reconstruction of one of the ultrasounds that they took while they were in space. You know, bottom right is what we call telemetry data painting. So this is, you know, pretty much just showing all of the actual in-flight, you know, like metrics that they used, like altitude and cabin pressure and everything like that. So this plays over a video over time of the entire journey. And the top part is actually what we call, yeah, this is, I think this one is splashdown. Yeah, so we took a few key moments from the actual like footage of it and turned it into a fluid simulation. So this was a great project because not only did we work with like inspiring data that was really important to, you know, research in humanity, but also a vast portion of the funds for this project were donated to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. So for this project, we raised almost $2 million for charity. It's just a great way to, you know, help out people and, you know, use art to empower others.
That's amazing.
It's a beautiful project.
Very inspiring, very inspiring. You know, I don't think anyone who listens to this or watches this video, this episode, is going to come away with criticisms of AI. You know, this is really showing the power of artificial intelligence when used the right way, of course.
Yeah,
awesome.
Thank you. This is another great project. This was one that we did recently. Another fantastic example of, you know, kind of that cultural, societal, emotional impact. This project is called Winds of Yawanawa. So we have a you know, great group of, you know, we call them friends and family, but it's an indigenous group of people that actually live in the Amazonia. And, you know, what we did for this project was used some of their patterns from like their jewelry or their, you know, clothing or some of the other stuff that they're making and turned it into, you know, an artwork. So the way we view this is like a co-creation between us and the Yawanawa people. And what we did was, you know, put on a huge event and sold some NFTs. And yeah, for this, we raised about $2.5 million for them. They're going to use this money to build a new school, to build a new village for leaders of the Amazonia to get together and meet and talk. And they'll build a new well for clean drinking water. So this is just, again, right, like, you know, we don't take anything from this project, right? It comes from the heart, and, you know, no financial gain for us and anything like that. It's just a beautiful mission and a beautiful way to inspire people and empower people with art.
Wow. I mean, keep saying congratulations because, you got like 5 different projects that have made impact already, and we're not even through everything you've got. So it's really amazing, man. It's like, that's what we like to see, because it's like you didn't even need to get into the NFT lane, but when you did, you embraced it and made it as impactful as possible. First with your initial kind of fan base, right? Your initial collector community base, but then spreading out to, different, whether St. Jude's Hospital, Amazonian tribes or culture, like that's fascinating. That's what it's all about. That's the technology, power of the technology, both Web3 and AI. So congrats again.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, this is actually it for my slides. But we work on so many different projects, both Web3 and not Web3. I just want to take a couple and highlight them here.
Thank you so much. I'll let you end sharing your screen then, and we'll jump over to the rest of the amazing content you've got on both the nft.refikanadol.com site and refikanadolstudio.com. Has a lot of amazing content as well. I did bring up the machine hallucinations. The first one you said was kind of based on Renaissance. So how have you felt about the evolution? And can you please, for our audience, define GAN? I don't even remember what the acronym is. I used to know it, but I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm going to let you do it. But define GAN, and then we'll get into kind of the evolution of it, because it's come a long way, I think, in the last couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. So again, is short for a generative adversarial network. And essentially what this network does is creates computer-generated images based on a set of real images. It's actually a very interesting algorithm that's pretty easy to understand from a high level. There are two fundamental parts of a GAN algorithm, and one of them is a generator and one of them is a discriminator. And so what you do first is you train this discriminator with the set of real images, and you're telling it like, this is a real image, this is a real image, this is what a real image of a flower looks like, this is what a real image of, like a building looks like, this is whatever. And so this generator learns to distinguish, okay, real image, not real image, real image, not real image. And so then once you've trained that, you actually start generating images from noise. This is Gaussian noise. It's just like, imagine if you take a random distribution of black and white pixels on an image, and essentially what you're doing is trying to denoise this into a real image. And so you're constantly trying to fool this discriminator that says, okay, is it a real image or is it a fake image? And it continues training, you train until you have a generator that's successfully fooling the discriminator that's seeing all of the real images already. So I mean, that's pretty much how it works. You keep training until your trained generator can fool your trained discriminator.
Wow, you make it sound relatively simple, but I know it's not simple at all. So looking at the evolution of it, for example, Midjourney, I think you might have seen these memes about like Midjourney V1, V2, V3, V4, and it's got like a Yoda, and at first he barely looks like Yoda at all, and then like by like V5 he's full on well detailed Yoda. So how is that evolution happening? And it sounds like it's just like there's no putting an end to it, and it's just going to continue to refine itself more and more. But how do you view that evolution? Like even the way we're looking at these machine hallucinations, and they're an awesome snapshot in time, right? And it's awesome that they were kind of your Genesis NFT as well. Looking at the GAN of that, you would maybe say they're not fully detailed. They're not like, the structure, the way that you might think of the Statue of David or whatever the case may be. So how do you view that evolution, and is it, are you happy with the way things have evolved so far?
Yeah, I mean, just very obviously, right? Like anything, AI has improved a lot over time, and especially in the last few years. We started training models really early on when it comes to image generation. We really started with StyleGAN, one, which is, sort of an NVIDIA developed algorithm, and worked with that and played around with that to do this early GAN stuff. We eventually moved on to StyleGAN 2 and StyleGAN 3. We still actually use StyleGAN 2 a lot. We just really like the way the outputs look from that.
Nice. That was my other question. Like, are you worried about like you'll get so used to a GAN style and then it evolves away from that style and you can't use it anymore? But now it sounds like you have a solution for that. You just have different versions that you can kind of go back and use if you want to.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. I mean, it's certainly something to be like aware of that happens, but we've worked on the StyleGAN 2 algorithm for so long and have, so many custom implementations of, models and checkpoints and everything like this, that we actually use StyleGAN 2 a lot still. Even though they have, the more recent StyleGAN 3, we're just really happy with the way our outputs look from StyleGAN 2 when we're doing GAN-based projects. We just love it. So, it's become like a little bit of a personal style in a way for the studio.
I dig it. I have a few friends who are in the GAN space, and they have certain ones that they swear by as well, and they don't want to change it, and they don't want to update the app because they don't want to lose the way it works. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Absolutely right. I mean, even when the models get outdated, we can kind of keep our own style a little bit. But yeah, I mean, definitely like more recently, the hot topic, at least in image generation, has been diffusion models. Diffusion models are really like the next evolution of, okay, well, if we're going to look at a progression, it probably starts with GANs, right? And really the image generation. And then, the diffusion models are different, but their own completely new class of amazing technology.
Wow. So how do they differ from GANs, if we can get a little bit wonky, the diffusion model?
Yeah, sure. So the way you interact with the diffusion model is very different from a GAN model. The training process is a little bit different also. How do I put this? There are two primary processes in diffusion training. You start with a set of real images again, of course, and there are two things that you focus on. One of them is forward diffusion and one of them is reverse diffusion. I mentioned noise earlier, right? And essentially what you're doing is taking like a super noisy image and trying to turn it into a real image, or you're taking a real image and turning it into noise. You can just train a pretty good algorithm doing that. That's good at generation. But the main difference in a diffusion algorithm is that it's actually a text to image based model. Usually GAN models are really like image to image based, or, just generally they will produce samples of some variety is mostly how you interact with them. Diffusion is a little bit different in that when you're feeding it data, you need to be pretty careful about how you're tagging it. Say this is flower, say this is pink flower, say this is, whatever level of specificity. And then, eventually an end user will be able to enter like a text prompt, like you've probably seen for Stable Diffusion or DALL-E 2 or anything similar, where you then take that text input and convert it into an image. So that's the biggest difference in interaction. Anyway, there are a couple other details. But,
I'm sure there's a lot of minutia there. Very cool. So I do want to ask, what do you say to those artists that I alluded to at the top of my episode here that are genuinely concerned about AI basically taking away their, maybe not their jobs, but the specialness of their skill, and I'll also mention again, anybody in the audience, thanks for joining. If you have any questions, we encourage audience participation. Feel free to shout out your question in the chat. But yeah, how do you respond to the artists that are genuinely concerned about AI, really diminishing their art?
So, yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a really valid concern and definitely something that, as an art studio, we've spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about. Wow, I mean, really complex subject, right? And we're not going to get into, it would be impossible to hammer out every detail of this. But the way I really like to think about this is in terms of a concept artist. The concept artist is like the benchmark for me, just in terms of somebody who I think would look at the things that are in the developments in the AI space and be like, wow, I have a lot of job risk. You can kind of take it like half glass full, half glass empty approach, in my opinion. I prefer to be much more positive about the matter, right? I think the half glass empty approach is, oh my God, AI is going to come for my job and replace me. What am I going to do? Doom is coming, AI is coming. Alternatively, I think the half glass full way to really approach this is, oh my God, what an amazing tool that I can use to make myself more productive. Before, like, if you were a concept artist, I would say, it takes you a long time to go through each iteration, but now you can sit there and, get really good at prompting algorithms and generate tons of outputs. And I would say, like, of course, when it comes to actual illustrations and stuff like that, when it comes to the artist's, pen and paper and, even creation of digital assets, there's nothing that can replace the artist. I think one really important thing to take away is that, well, it's true, anyone can go prompt a diffusion model and create outputs. Being a talented visual artist still requires a lot of, acuity and awareness and sense of style that you're looking for in what you want. Right, like I'm not a concept artist. You know, if I were to go try to generate something for a movie, for example, you know, I don't have the best creative vision on what those assets should look like in comparison to a concept artist who would be able to go and say, I like this about this output I generated, and I like this about this output I generated. Now I'm going to try to combine them together and create something new and cool. So I still think, like, even in the AI scene, like, that artist eye is still really important. You know, and of course, just nothing can replace the actual illustrations that people are making. You know, there's a lot of personality that's shown through, just even in, you know, fine things like the way people shape their meshes or do their brushstrokes or something like that. So,
No doubt.
Yeah, you can never replace the artist, even if you can generate art. Is my opinion.
Perfectly said. And I think I agree 100%. And also, I mentioned the two previous guests, both NFTP from last week and then Dr. Lemney before that, who have used AI, and they kind of came to a similar perspective that, like, they were artists prior to AI, and now they're using AI to kind of add some new angle and, like you say, use it as a tool, but it's still their artist's eye that, you know, allows for it to still have their own uniqueness, their own touch. And, you know, like you say, it's a tool. So that's awesome. I love to see that. And thanks for sharing. So what about on the blockchain side of things, right? Like, even on the technology base, you know, you hear people talking about quote unquote mass adoption. You see a lot of, you know, use cases for AI art, which is definitely your use case. But on the technology level, do you think that AI is going to help with kind of the expansion and evolution and success ultimately of blockchain technology? And how could that potentially work? Like, is there a symbiosis there? And do you see, you know, this evolution of AI helping to push the blockchain technology forward at all too?
Yeah, so that's another really interesting question, actually. I guess from a high level, right? The same way you gave the concept artist, the same way I gave the concept artist example, you know, I think AI has a lot of use cases in other fields, and one of those fields in particular is programming. You know, still, and I don't think programmers will be replaced by AI entirely, right? Like, you know, I've done some tandem programming with ChatGPT and, you know, some other stuff, and, like, it can really help to get this computer generated code up and running. And, you know, it's good for doing a lot of stuff. But again, right, it requires a lot of knowledge in the field, and knowing how to construct multiple things together in complex ways that are well designed is still really difficult. I would say for the blockchain space in particular, right, so I think I mentioned earlier that, like, the quality of any model is based on data. You know, like, and I really feel that's also the case in using AI to push forward blockchain technology. You know, when you go look at something that's been done for a long time, like, I think web development is a good example. You know, there are 100 million ways to, you know, center a div in an HTML page or just a web app or something like that, right? And ChatGPT and other, you know, AI generator and other AI generators like that are very, very good at giving you things that have been seen a million times. Where the data exists, you'll get really transparent and clear results.
Right.
I think the Web3 space is a little bit different than that, because obviously it's a very early and emerging technology. So, you know, if you wanted to go into ChatGPT and ask it to generate a smart contract for my NFT, you know, I'm sure it would give you some sort of, you know, pretty reliable output as far as things go. But there's just a lot more innovation there and a lot more data that hasn't been seen. And just in terms of, like, evolution and innovation also, you know, I think AI is great for concepts, but usually what AI thrives in is doing things that it's seen before. And we talk about pushing forward blockchain technology. You know, I still think most of that innovation is going to come from humans, because the limitation of AI is that it's based on data that's been seen. And so when you're introducing concepts and technologies that haven't been seen before and working with those, that's where, you know, AI really starts to see its weaknesses.
I see. So in some cases, because blockchain is so bleeding edge, maybe AI doesn't have the solutions quite yet, but maybe as the technology evolves and becomes a little bit more ubiquitous, there will be kind of weak points found out by AI, identified by AI, and helping with kind of the evolution, you would say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I already think that there will be, like, really great tools that integrate AI and Web3 already. You know, just an example I can think of off the top of my head would be, like, using AI to do, you know, security and penetration testing on a smart contract, right? Like, amazing application of AI and Web3 combining to make the space better as a whole.
For sure.
So
And
tons of
security is a huge
integration.
one. Yeah, I think chain analysis is already kind of doing that, right? Like they integrate AI with some of their kind of big scrawling of the whole blockchain to try to identify really sketchy wallets and things like that. That's awesome. So we had talked about, or I mentioned off the top, kind of the metaverse as well, and how, basically being able to kind of scan or video record certain environments and then bring them into, Unreal Engine and use AI to basically fill out any parts of the area that hasn't been captured on video, and then make it into an actual 3D immersive experience. So that's kind of a very obvious kind of way that AI will likely, or already is, really impacting the metaverse. But how do you see that evolution happening? And then we have a bit of a question from the chat as well, so thank you for those in the chat, appreciate you. But how do you see that evolution happening with the metaverse and artificial intelligence?
So I don't want to say too much about this and leak some of the things that we're working on right now.
Come on,
but I will say,
let's go.
I will say, this is something that we're very actively looking into and certain that it is possible. We've done some pretty early experiments with let's say taking scans of environments and porting them to metaverse 3D like spaces. These are like real scans of real places and using them to generate textures in 3D environments and using those for the metaverse. There are tons of other applications. They're really just amazing things that you can do with computer generated images. We can turn them into 3D assets by doing, the right kinds of applications for them and then porting them into games and, softwares for creating games like Unreal Engine. And then you can use these in generative ways real time. There's really a lot that you can do. Again, I don't want to go too in depth here and say too much, but I will say catch us at Unreal Engine Festival in October.
There we go. Let's go. I want to get to the Unreal Engine Festival. That sounds like a good time. So shout out to log.eth. He had a question about the idea that, there's going to be a lot of engagement in the future, likely with people spending, 8+ hours a day in the metaverse. And I think there's a lot of concern about the idea that the digital world is becoming maybe too enticing, or some people way out there think that we're being pushed into the digital world so that we just don't care about what's happening in the real world. I'm expanding on the question, but the question is, how is this good? Is there, are you concerned about, the downside of the digital world and really people spending 8+ hours of their day, in the metaverse essentially?
Well, first of all, hi log.eth. This is a good friend of mine from the Web3 space.
Nice.
Very active collector and great person.
Awesome.
So hi, first of all. And I feel like, at least in general, some people already are pretty engaged in digital spaces naturally, and choose to make these choices in life, for lack of a better word, right? There are definitely people who go and spend all day playing games online, or look, I personally spend almost all of my time behind a computer as well, right? It's kind of just nerd culture, so I think some of this exists already, but definitely there's a lot of motion toward the metaverse and being in the digital world in general. I think COVID has had a really interesting impact on the way we view digital world versus physical world. I think there's at least a subset of people today who have some fears about being in the physical world. The great things that we saw come from that, though, are that people can be connected from all across the world in a digital space, and it's really enabled people to do great things in life. Some people work from home and travel the world, and it doesn't matter where they are, right? And so there's a lot of great enablers as well. Like anything in life, right? I think there's the glass half full, glass half empty approach, and I tend to always side on the glass half full and see the positives of it, right? But of course, the physical world is also super important, even for digital art and digital assets. And I think looking at the MoMA installation is a great example of that.
Sure.
There'll never be anything that can replace the physical connection between two people or a person in a space.
100%. I agree. And, we had Dr. Jane Thomason, who's a kind of big international global metaverse advocate on the show. And she kind of spoke about the concept of it. The metaverse is an always on immersive environment, right? And so from that perspective, the same way you kind of view the AI as a tool, in the future, I believe that metaverse will essentially be a tool for people that want to offer this always on immersive environment for whatever their project might be, or maybe even governments have an advantage to be able to offer that to their citizens. So there's a lot of parts of the metaverse that I think it gets gamified, and I'm a gamer. I always say it's the metaverse and the idea that there was real life value added to the digital world that really pulled me into Web3. But I stayed for the culture, I stayed for the art, stayed for the community. But really, as a gamer, like you just mentioned, there's a lot of us kind of unapologetically living in the digital world already, and enjoying it and really having no qualms about it at all, and making community, making friends internationally, globally. So definitely, it's going to happen. So I think that, yeah, that's the way it goes. People are going to kind of have their own perspectives, to each their own. But I do think ultimately the metaverse, as it evolves, will be understood as a tool, even more so than necessarily a video game or just a place you go to hang out and spend all your time. But you'll go there with a purpose, And even personally, we're building a space out right now for the Web3 Warriors podcast in Voxels, the Voxels metaverse, which I'm a huge fan of because they have a very cool community of builders and creators. And it's all about really showing our NFT collection, which we have an extensive one, and I have my own personal NFT collection as well. So we'll be showing those. And so that's a purpose, right? So now if you go to my space in the metaverse, you're going to be able to see my whole NFT collection. If you want to buy one, maybe you want to buy one, that's great. But at least I have a place where I can send people to go look at my NFT collection. That's not just an OpenSea page. It's actually an immersive walking around, looking at your different art on the walls and all of that. So I think that's an awesome use case, and I think there's so many use cases like that, and that's how the metaverse should be treated. But there will be those who just want to play a video game and hang out there all the time as well. So yeah, great question, Log.eth. Appreciate you. If there's any other questions in the chat, definitely feel free to chime in. So you talked briefly as well earlier about data sovereignty, and really the idea that you're taking in a lot of data, you're using a lot of real-time data, but you're not like on the back end trying to take that data and monetize it or sell it or something. You're actually making sure you expunge it right away, and it's just being used for the sake of art, right? So on that, do you think that AI can help us kind of encourage data sovereignty? I often speak about Web3. We talk about the Web3 ethos, quote unquote. It's all about community. It's all about abundance. But I also think it's about data sovereignty, frankly, and financial sovereignty too, of course. But data sovereignty is a conversation that I think is often lost because, frankly, the powers that be don't want it to happen because there's a lot of money in the lack of data sovereignty that's going on right now. But do you think that AI can actually help us enforce data sovereignty and kind of take our data back, or at the very least understand what's happening with our data in a more transparent way?
Wow. That's a great question, and a really hard one to answer, right? Because, oh God, at least for me in my life, I've always been really happy and enjoying what I do, and the fact that it's about art. And the reason for that is that, when I was in college, obviously I was studying AI and computer science and really working in this field. And when I met Refik and started working in art, it was a great way for me to be super involved in AI projects and programming, and, have the ability and capability to do projects and development and everything like that, but not use data in a commercial and personal way, right? Like if you were thinking about a classic job in AI today, you'd probably think, oh, I'm going to go work for Netflix and do, algorithms where I'm working on recommendations, right? A lot of this is like analyzing personal data, which is just never something that I had to do. And I was
You'll get paid big money for that too, Christian.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I'm very happy and fortunate and grateful that I never really had to do in that way. With that being said, though, I think I alluded to it earlier, right? Like part of the thing that makes these models so great today is the fact that they do have data, and the way that models work right now. And part of the reason that we have such fantastic models like ChatGPT is that these models have had access to a lot of data. Whether people like it or not, these models would not be as good as they are or as useful as they are if they didn't have access to this data. So I think there's a very fine line between, all right, we want to train good models that are useful for lots of people, and okay, we don't want to be invasive about data and the way we use it. And I really think that the key to success in this area in the long run will be to have very clear transparency to people and for people about what data is being used and how it's being used, and give them the ability to opt in or opt out. I just think it's really important for the long run, because a lot of people will just, willingly give data for training models. We've seen this before time and time again. But I think oftentimes, you're presented with a 322-page agreement that says, do you want to sign up for this platform? And you just click yes and sign the contract, but don't know how the data is being used. And so I think, there's some educational stuff that can go into that. And I, would love to start seeing this in like high schools and colleges about, data privacy and the internet and things like this. But I also just think from, large corporations and people who are doing and working in AI that, raising awareness about this issue and being transparent about how data is being used and giving people the ability to opt in or out will be really important for the long-term health of the space.
100%. And definitely that proliferation of data is a big part of how we got to ChatGPT and all of these other amazing AI tools. And even I think what you've pulled together, right, from an artistic perspective, is on the archives of the internet and a lot of specific data sets, right? So definitely it's a balancing act, and there's a lot of benefit that comes from such ubiquitous data, but on the kind of personal sovereignty side, on the data kind of privacy side, I think there are some improvements that could be made and hopefully will be made. And I do hope that the Web3 ethos is going to be part of what pushes that. And we kind of, like you say, have that opportunity at the very least to opt out, or, give data to just specific entities that you're comfortable giving data to, and not just like carte blanche, wide open space. But yeah, it's interesting. I know Apple took some flack when they came out with the concept of being able to opt out of certain apps, tracking you outside of using the app, right? And I think Facebook even sued them over it. So it's interesting to see that, like, yeah, so when you start talking that conversation, there's a lot of blowback, and there are some legitimate business concerns, but also legitimate technology concerns, because it may stifle, certain opportunities, right? So yeah, great. Thanks for that feedback. And looking at the big question, of the evolution of artificial intelligence and machine learning and where it's all going, what do you personally see as the end goal, and are we moving in the right direction?
Wow, the end goal of
I gotta
AI?
ask the big questions while I have an AI expert here.
Wow, it's almost impossible to say what the end goal of AI is. Obviously, I think in the foreseeable future, what we want to do is have like, almost intelligent robotics. I think a good example of the company that's working on this right now is Hanson Robotics. I'm blanking on the name of their robot that they demonstrate. I think it's Sophia, but it's like a human-esque looking robot, that is able to do like conversational,
yeah, I think
and
it's Sophia.
some
I've
tasks
seen her
like
too.
this. And
isn't that connected with the AGI coin as well?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Anyway, I feel like the next step really is to give more integration to AI and also more access to people. This is sort of just what we've seen over time. You start talking about integrations of it, like AI and robotics is a great example of an integration of AI that I think will be, pretty predominant in the future. And also one of the, more recent innovations we've seen is something like ChatGPT. And I think the amazing thing that it does is gives, pretty much everybody the ability to interact with complex AI models, which we haven't necessarily seen before. So I think bringing AI to the masses and creating more integrated applications of it will be, sort of what this looks like in the long run, but almost impossible to say, almost impossible to predict what it will look like, because
what the real end goal is. But that's great. And, I think you just keep bringing it back to tools, right? And being used to help people, execute on their projects, essentially. Very cool. Very cool. Thanks. Log.eth says he loves the questions, and he's wondering if you can speak a little bit to the use of scent in some RAS works. Is that a thing that's going on? You're going to be looking at some environmental scent exposure. I'm not sure how you would, yeah. What's the situation there?
So we're working on a couple of things that are, sort of in this vein. What we call this is like a multi-model approach. We have a lot of research done, especially in the images, right? But we're also looking at text and images and audio, and kind of exploring what other top level fields we can introduce in AI and how we can correlate them together. So yeah, I mean, in the last year or so, we've been working with an amazing perfume company, that's helping us work on AI generated scent. There are a couple different ways that you can go about doing this. And the first way is like, whenever you have a piece of data, if you put it through a neural net, you essentially are getting like a computer representation of what it is. So that's kind of the way I like to think about it. For example, I put an image through a particular neural net, and what I get out is like a one-dimensional vector of like 1,000 numbers that means pretty much nothing to me, but a lot to a computer. And you can sort of translate this information from there into like perfume scents. Perfumes are made using chords and other molecules. So we're using some of that data to like influence the mixture of molecules in a perfume, for example.
And on the flip side, is there an idea that you're actually taking in scent and then creating art based on scent? Is that something you're exploring too? Or is it more so from the opposite end? Like, yeah, I'm just trying to see where this technology can go. So you're like plugging scent into a computer somehow?
This is another one we're actually actively researching right now. Okay. It's in pretty early stages, so I'm not sure if I feel comfortable to say too much about it. I don't want to unveil anything just at this moment, but this is something we're looking at as well. Of course, the only consideration is that we really need to limit these scents to like bacteria and plants, right? Never want to get into any sort of animal life there because, right, environmental concerns.
No doubt, for sure. And there's all kinds of, random ethical concerns that I'm sure you butt up against throughout this work that you're doing. And honestly, it sounds like you kind of have a almost unlimited toolbox there at the Refik Anadol studio. It's like you're allowed to kind of just go in these creative directions, and they're paying off. You're setting entire new kind of a new area of art, a new area of Web3 art especially, which is really cool to see. And your use of NFTs are really fascinating, and I love that you've continued to hit on the social impact opportunities as well, and not just kept it for profit line, but really trying to spread it out to the community and make a difference. So and they're beautiful. So we're showing a lot of your NFTs on the Nifty Gateway, as well as the stuff you've got on Ethereum, on the OpenSea, and just the use of AI to create this kind of art is really fascinating. So I just want to let anybody in the chat know we're going to be winding down shortly, so definitely feel free to ask any questions now or forever hold your peace. But what is kind of around the corner for Refik Anadol Studio? I think you've alluded to it a little bit, but do you have kind of a top level goal for, let's say, 2024 that we can look forward to, and maybe in the Web3 space for any would-be collectors to look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few great things we're working on right now. At least in terms of research, we've been working on, an AI rainforest model. So in, continuation with the Awanawa people, we've been looking at two primary research subjects. One of them is like an AI rainforest multi-model, which we want to use to create like generative flowers, and, we call it flora, fauna, fungi are like the three, primary matters we're looking at in terms of nature.
That's awesome.
And using multi-model concepts and applying it to those. We really are striving to have like great transparent data collection from open sources and make sure everything's credited and able to look up literally every image in the data set. So we see this as like almost like a generative scientific database is kind of the way I like to think about it. In addition to that, we're researching on using AI for language preservation. One of the challenges, especially for a group of indigenous people like the Awanawa, is that they're concerned that their language will disappear. We've seen a lot of cases in this throughout time, and we're researching, what kind of applications can AI have in preserving this language and making sure that it will essentially never die. So
That's
this
amazing.
is, kind of what we're really interested in on the AI side. And I just want to give a quick thank you to my team as well. We're a team of like 7 amazing AI researchers and experts, and none of this would be possible without them. So wow. Huge thank you.
I'm hella impressed with everything you're working on and the ways that you've utilized NFTs and the technology to really make a difference, and just the way you speak about art and its kind of intrinsic value, more so than its monetary value, right? And I think that's really what it's all about. It's really fascinating, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. Looking at the kind of average person, so we spoke about the artists who have concerns, obviously, around AI taking it, but there's a lot of skepticism, I think, in the broader society, about artificial intelligence and where things are going. And I think you've alluded to it kind of being a tool and definitely glass half full kind of thing. But how would you say is kind of the best way for your average person out there to understand AI and to, not get left behind, essentially?
Honestly, just spend time on the internet. One of the reasons that I really got into programming, I got into programming at a pretty young age, 12 years old or something. And one of the main reasons that I found it so interesting and I liked it so much is that, it's inherently like a digital world. And so whenever I wanted more information about a subject, or I said, oh, I want to learn how to do this in programming, I was able to go look it up online and find really great resources about how to do it, how it worked. And, really, there's a really huge ability to go out on the internet and find information about things and teach yourself and learn. I feel like for programming and AI and, pretty much all matters like that, there is an abundance of information out there on the internet. If you are passionate about AI or want to learn more, just go look it up. You can find out a lot just by doing some research. There are great tools. There are great, practice programs that you can write and some fantastic research papers. So
there you go.
The information is there. Just gotta find it.
Google it, do your research. And on the Web3 topic, final question, what do you say to those who are skeptical of Web3 and the NFTs and really the marketplace? It's gone into a bit of a quieter time, right, in the NFT space. And at the same time, we've been hearing from regulators. It seems like there's some positive movement maybe in the recent weeks on that front. But in general, obviously, there's a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt out there about, where is this all going? How is the NFT space evolving? You're leaning into it fairly heavily, so I seems like you're confident in the technology and its use case into the future. So what do you say to kind of the skeptics, and why is the Refik Anadol studio so confident with NFTs and Web3?
The reason I am still very confident about Web3, of course, like put all the financial concerns aside, right? For me, the breakthrough in Web3 technology is that it's the most convincing and authentic way to distribute digital assets and to prove ownership of them. Obviously we've been doing this as a studio now for 10 years, right? But most of the way this looks like in history is, oh, I want to buy an artwork. Okay, sure. Here's a USB drive. I'll mail it to you. Here's a link to a Dropbox asset. You can download it and play it on your screen, right? And so when it comes to, actually feeling like you can prove that digital ownership and distribute digital assets, this is still the most convincing way to me as a technology. And I think that's a really important takeaway for the Web3 space. Obviously in the last couple of years, we saw a lot of hype cycle just about people getting onboarded to it and figuring it out. And, of course, we're all concerned about like the market crash and what does the future of this look like. Personally, I'm not concerned that this will go anywhere. I usually think that, especially in the digital art scene, that there's a lot of inherent value in those assets. I think the Web3 space will come back in a very meaningful way. I bet it will look different than it did before. I'm sure that's true. But, how many times have people said Bitcoin was dead? And, certainly I think we're all certain at this point that Bitcoin is not dead and not going to die. So
now the institutions are just trying to elbow their way in there and take it from the rest of us, but definitely not going anywhere. And that's what you say. It's about digital ownership, and that's what it's all about. Digital ownership, proof of ownership, being able to take something that previously was just digital, and maybe you could buy it on a closed server and pay money to have it on a website, but you didn't truly own it in the sovereign sense, right? In your own wallet that's held under your own private keys. So that's what it's all about, and being able to connect with collectors and supporters of this amazing AI art that you're working on is awesome. And you've definitely utilized the technology for all the right reasons. And that's why we have the show. It's what Web3 Warriors is all about. We're confident in this technology not going anywhere into the future, and really the provenance and the ability to just create new avenues of opportunity. And the way you're doing it, the way you're helping the Amazonian tribes, the way you've helped St. Jude's Hospital is just kind of micro examples of the broader wave. And that's what it's all about. That's the Web3 ethos. Is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap things up here, Christian?
No, this is great. I mean, Web3, digital art, AI, these are all just great areas of life. You know, if you're new to it, highly recommend you just pursue information. There's so much that you can learn online today. It's the beautiful thing about AI and the internet is that all the information is there for you.
Amazing. Well, we'll definitely be keeping in touch and keeping an eye out on the Refik Anadol studio. We're so grateful for this opportunity to pick your brain. I've definitely learned a whole lot about AI, and I hope our listeners and viewers did as well. And that's awesome. So next week, we're going to be looking at Web3 gaming and that conversation. So that's a pretty sticky conversation. So we'll see where that goes. But I appreciate you, Christian, and we'll be in touch. Everybody check out Refik Anadol. Follow Christian on Twitter at Christian Burke 0. And the podcast will be live by tomorrow, and our video archives will also be live by tomorrow. So we'll have everything up on the networks. Thanks log.eth and YesBut and Sasha and Sarah, all the other people in the chat. Appreciate you. And until next time, we will